So today we get to finish our little journey for the month of April. And our journey this month was about triumph of the Spirit. So what I wanted us to do is take that energy of this spiritual time with Lent and Easter, Ramadan, Passover, and just sort of ride that energetic wave of this idea of what does it mean to triumph? And so we're used to, in our culture, thinking of triumph as a zero-sum game, so that if I win, you lose. And winning is really this kind of thing that we think of as about aggression and about might and kind of pushing through, right? And so this month we've been exploring what that could look like alternatively. So we started out this journey by talking about living in victory. And so using the Palm Sunday experience about how Jesus re-inscripted that, re-transformed the idea of what it meant to be a victor. And so for us, how we learn in our lives to be able to do that. And then last week, we moved on to this idea of living in audacity. Again, looking at this journey of Jesus through this Lenten time, through the journey to the crucifixion and then resurrection, to understand what does it mean to be bold? What does it mean to be brave? Does it mean to step forward in your truth, to go, as the song says, to the mountain and see and know and be? And though you may not be there immediately, you may not be ready, you know that there's that something that's calling, and at least you're listening. Living in audacity, going big, going bold, and going home within. Daring to be. So this week, we get to talk about our final kind of topic in this theme, and that's about surrender. Surrendering. And most of the time, we think of surrender as this negative thing. If I'm letting go, then I'm a failure. If I'm letting go, that's resignation. That is me not doing what I'm supposed to do. It's about losing. It's about cowardice. And so today we're going to really look at that and play with that a little bit, especially through the lens of this Lenten Easter season. So what does it mean to let go and let God, to be part of that great allowing of surrender? You know, most of the time, God, we're conditioned in our society to be in constant stress, are we not? It's always being on the go, doing this, doing that, getting better, doing better, looking at what's happening, following the Joneses, keeping up with the Joneses, all of these kinds of things that are pressure, you know, and that's not even counting all of the things that have been happening in our world the last 2 years. So we're constantly in a state of wanting to control it all. That's the way that we think we achieve balance and peace, by just holding a tight grip on everything around us and even ourselves. But that causes this narrowness, you know, even physically when we're in a state of control, it causes our breath to be truncated. We're not breathing fully. You know, our muscles are tense. That's why we have oftentimes muscle pain or muscle spasms. You know, our heart is pumping faster. The adrenaline is going, and our whole bodies are constantly in a state of distress and chaos. But not by comparison, if we look at surrendering in and of itself gives us that physical release. We're breathing more fully. We're resting. We're allowing. We're opening. We're being in calm. We're being in peace. We have that clearer vision when we take that moment, that breath, that beat. And we have more energy, and we open to the possibility when we're not holding on so tight. It sounds awesome, right? Woo, I want some surrender. It is one of the simplest things, and yet the hardest to do. Who are my control freaks in the house? Yes, a lot of us. I think maybe that's unity control freak, I don't know. I myself, believe it or not, am a recovering control freak. Yes, I'm coming out today as a recovering control freak. You know, I learned that as a state of being. Even since I was a little girl, I would always get teased until this day. People talk about the fact that I would carry a humongous backpack. That's probably why I have back problems and shoulder problems now. I mean, I'm talking like a survival backpack that you see like at the North Face, right? It was humongous with all these pockets. And I was just having all these things in it all the time. Band-Aids, never know. Toothpick, somebody might need it. You know, respirator, hey, who knows, you know? All sorts of things that I held in this backpack. I mean, the upside was people wanted to be my friends because they knew if they needed something, I had it in my backpack, you know? But that was me always wanting to be ready. You know, I was the queen of I love alliteration since I was a kid. I really do too. And that was me planning, predicting, and preparing. I needed to know, needed to be ready for whatever was going to happen, you know? And then I became a parent, right? And so that ratcheted it up. And I had like this big diaper bag. It was like the Harry Potter, the Mary Poppins bag, like it never ended. There was always something. And I was like always thinking, well, what if she needs tummy time? I gotta have her little tummy mat, right? I mean, what if she's hungry and she needs snacks? But what if she's not in the mood for a savory snack? Maybe she wants a sweet snack. So I'm having the sweet and the savory. And so this whole bag full of all of these things ready, trying to control and prepare what my daughter might do. And then she got older. She started talking. She started talking back and having her own mind and own opinion about things. And I say all the time that my daughter, Isabela, was Spirit's way of laughing at me, first of all, but also of teaching me. She was my greatest teacher because with her, I couldn't be in this control state. She came into this iteration of life a total free bird. She has never abided by convention, by cultural standards. She was the type of kid who would say, I would take her, we'd go to different events, and I'd say, okay, we're going to a fancy event. I'd like you to put on your party dress. And she would say, no, I think I need my cheetah girl pajamas. And so there she would put on her little pajamas. Or we would be going somewhere else to the park to play, and it was a muddy day, and she would say, no, I need my first communion dress with my Virgen de Guadalupe, Mother Mary, on the front. And there I kid you not, these are true stories. But that was her. She was always in tune with where she was at, what she needed, what she wanted. And as time went on, I learned to be okay with that. I learned to calm myself. I learned to just surrender. Surrender. It's not an easy thing, but it's something that with all of what we learn here, it's about practice. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen with one instance or one situation, but we open ourselves up to this idea of how to become this way that we engage life that's not so intense, that maybe can be a little bit more playful, ooh, or joyful, whoa, or dare I say, fun. Don't we want that, to experience a life of fun that doesn't have to be so intense? It is possible. You know, we're looking at this month, and we just went through Easter. Jesus was the epitome of the art of surrender. Now, I'm not even talking about when we get to the crucifixion and resurrection. I'm talking his entire ministry. If we look at biblically what is said about what he did and what he spoke of, all of it was about the surrender. Look at the birds of the air. They have everything they need, so do we. Look at the way we can engage with each other without criticism and just allow people to be and forgive. All of the teachings that were so deep in his ministry about what he was bringing to the world really in many ways are ultimately about the art of surrender. Surrendering to who we think we need to be in the world. Surrendering to what people want of us to be in the world. Surrendering all of these past mistakes, all of these failures, allegedly, all of these things that we're coming with into this, that we can transform. surrender. So when we look at the crucifixion becomes this big portal where it's the ultimate crossing out. In unity, we look at all of this metaphysically. And so the metaphysics of the crucifixion is the idea of literally crossing out all that is not of spirit, crossing out all of these false ideas, crossing out all of the things that do not bring us close to that union with who we are as divine beings. It's that full and final erasure of the personality, and the personality being of this earth, the personality being of the ego, right? It's a surrender to the Christ mind within, the Christ within us that lives and moves and breathes in us as us, that we are a part of, that we are not even a part of, we are intricately tied so that we can't even talk about it as a part. We are that. How do we do that? Giving up the false belief, giving up the cross, crossing it out in the name of our Christ nature. Charles Fillmore, in the 12 Powers of Man, says that in the mystery of the cross is hidden the overcoming of Satan. Now again, we don't believe in Satan in the way that traditional, maybe mainstream Christianity does. Satan is just these error ideas, these false ideas. So it's the overcoming of this. It's a symbolic representation of the crossing out of the carnal mind, and it's the redeemed man's consciousness. It's the intellect and the pseudo-spiritual that must be crucified so the great I am is elevated to the high place. So that's what the crucifixion for us means in that sense. So then we move on and we look at how do we understand this idea of the crucifixion and the surrender? When we look at what Jesus said, at least from a couple places in the Bible, there's two places that I want to just mark for us so that we understand this. In his final words in two of the Gospels, we have something that really is ultimately the ultimate surrender. In Luke 23:46, as he's literally dying, he have said, "Father, in your hands I commend my spirit." Father, in your hands I commend my spirit. And then in John 19, verse 30, when Jesus received the wine, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and he gave his spirit. Not all of us understand the power of those words, but we here in Unity do. And part of it is we look at what happened even at the crucifixion. People just left, didn't they not? Where were the disciples? Nowhere to be found. Gone, gone. They were, I don't know Jesus, right? Nobody was there. Part of that, in some senses, had to do with this fear of the surrender, this fear of letting go of the control. And we have to think about, what does that mean for us? Where we have to open up ourselves to accept what is happening in our life, to be ready for that surrender. If we go back to the Garden of Gethsemane, let's just kind of take a little bit reverse before the crucifixion. Again, as I said, everything that Jesus did is leading up to this moment, leading up to this final surrender, all in his teachings, in his healings, in everything. After he comes back, after we have the scene where we talked about the Last Supper even here before, after he goes and does all of that, he knows what he's coming to do. He knows what he has to do and be. And he goes into this Garden of Gethsemane to be able to take that pause and meditate. And if we look at what's happening there, it wasn't easy. Oftentimes we have this picture of Jesus as like, I got this, right? But we see in there, in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was struggling. He was having a hard time accepting what his fate was, accepting what he knew he had been called to this iteration of life to do. So in that time, he's there trying to just be in alignment and be ready. And he says something really powerfully in that. We see in Luke 22:42, where he says, Father, if thou art willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. So what's the cup? The cup is of faith. Like, is there like a plan B here, God? How do we remove this? He's like, remove the cup. Remove this thing that I have to drink, that I have to make and ingest and be me and be moving in the world, this nutrition that I know that I must take in. But then he says, but if it's not your will, if this is not, I will accept what I'm called to do. And so he does. This is one of the most powerful phrases in the Bible, and one of the most powerful phrases we as human beings can utter and say, not my will. Because the will comes from the ego. The will comes from the carnal mind. The will comes from what we think oughta, shoulda, coulda, all of that. But when we open ourselves up to this notion of the will of Spirit, the will of the Holy Spirit, the will of God, the will of the eternal, the will of the Almighty, the will of the allness, whatever you want to call that energy moving, when you open up to that, something special happens. Way back in the day when computers first started, there was something called DOS. Anybody remember that? I'm dating myself. When I think about that oftentimes, that was sort of the operating system, right, for a computer. And I'm not going to try to pretend that I really know what that means, but I know it's something that actually controls, creates. We too have that within us. I like to call it DOS as well, but it's the divine operating system. We are all intimately connected to that knowingness, to that understanding, to that wisdom, to all of that. It lives and moves and breathes within us. And so all we have to do is just surrender. Thy will, not mine. And know and trust that it's kicking in. It will kick in. That it's part of who we are, what we're carrying with us as divine inheritors of allness, of wonder, of possibility, of moving forward, of moving inward. All of this is ours. So in the Garden of Gethsemane, we see that surrender. We see that possibility. It's really funny. When I came and gave my talk here in July, I gave my talk on Jesus at the Garden of Gethsemane. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but I remember that. Because I was talking about Jesus surrendering and following his divine path and how all of us were called to follow our divine path. And I talked about my divine path in ministerial school. But little did I know that I was actually talking about my divine path here. That night, when I went back to my hotel room, I didn't sleep a wink. And I do mean nothing at all. Because when I hit this stage in July, and I saw and felt this, I knew I was home. But I fought it. I'm not gonna lie, you all. I fought it with everything I had, because it doesn't make sense. Tennessee, Nashville, me, leave my home, leave my family, leave my daughter, leave my life, leave my business. Are you kidding me? What? And that night, I was literally like Jesus in the garden, wrestling, trying to figure out, and then trying to say, okay, I'm going to just be open. I don't know if they'll give me the job anyway. And then the job came, and here I am. But I know that in that surrender for me, that brought me to one of my greatest blessings and gifts, each and every one of you that I get to be with every Sunday, this amazing community and all that we are doing collaboratively together. That for me is one of the confirmations that I have about the surrender, because I see it in my own life and what it means. And so I invite you all today to think about that. Think about the surrender for yourselves. I know some of you are probably like, I don't need to surrender anything. My life is good, right? I would venture to just push back a little bit and say, maybe you might want to think about that one. Because there are all of us that have something we need to lay on the altar. There is something that we need to cross out. Maybe it's about your family or your relationship or your job or your relationship to your body or your nutrition or anything. Or do you need to move? Do you need to take a new job? Do you need to leave a job? Do you need to take a new relationship? Do you need to leave a relationship? There's so many things that we have in our lives that happen at every moment that we need to surrender to. Do I need to retire? All of these things we're coming into this with. It's not just my journey, it's everyone's journey here. To be able to go into the great surrender, to be able to live your best life, to be able to live your life connected to Spirit. So I want to take a little bit of time for meditation. And I'd like us to play a little bit with this, because we are a practical Christianity. So we're going to just explore this today for a few minutes in the silence. So I invite you all to just take a minute. Take a few deep cleansing breaths. Allow that monkey mind to rest and allow that inner eye, that connection, that alignment to activate. Opening ourselves up to the one presence and the one power, living and moving and breathing in us as us. You take a deep breath. Relax. Let go. Surrender. Be. Opening up to what is ours to do. Opening up to who we really are. Opening up to the truth of our being. And in this sacred space, I invite you for just a moment to raise the question, where in your life might you need surrender? What is it that you might need to surrender to? Where are you over-controlling? Where is that over-control leading to destruction? And how might you partner with Spirit? How might you allow for that spiritual release and surrender to move into, transform your life? Surrender. We allow for Spirit to give us the gift of surrender in the silence. Into your hands, I commend my spirit. Thy will, not mine, be done. I drink of the cup today with assurance and faith. And we breathe that in, knowing and affirming that we are exactly where we need to be and that we are exactly who we need to be as we continue to open up in this great surrender. And so it is. Amen. Again, the easiest thing and yet the hardest. I'm going to share quickly a couple things as we're a practical Christianity to think about as you take this journey in surrender. And it's a way for me to kind of think about it. I say, mind your own. There's three things. Mind your fear. Where are you afraid? What's the worst that can happen? What if you don't do it? What could really, really, really happen? Allow yourself to open up to that is not being so cataclysmic. Not being attached to an outcome and not being attached to the idea that we as human beings know best. We have access to that wisdom that sometimes knows way more. That operating system we have has an infinite amount of information and possibilities, more than our human mind can ever comprehend or bring forth. So if we set that intention to connect with that operating system, that divine database even, we're able to come up with solutions and possibilities that we could never have imagined on our own. So minding your fear, minding your business. Because most of the time when we're controlling, aren't we controlling other people? Be truthful. We're controlling other people's reactions. We're controlling other people's actions. What should my kids do? What should they be doing in school? What shouldn't they be doing? And I'm not saying some of these things aren't important, but some of these things we can let go of. Some of this we can let go of. What if they don't? What is the worst thing that could happen? They might actually be happy. Whoa. And mind your freedom, finally. Because when we're in these states of control, we're boxing ourselves in. We're not letting our spirit flow free, and so we are not in a state of freedom. We're not in a state of being able to judge what we need to do out in the world. We're fighting with ourselves, we're fighting with others, and ultimately we're even fighting with God. So we're minding our freedom, allowing and for understanding how we can activate that freedom and get out of that box. All of that. Instead of muscling through, like I must do it, we have to do it this way, just allowing for that surrender and release. And lastly, think about it this way. We're such a culture of acronyms now, right? Especially with texting. Right? Even my daughter texts things and I'm like, what does that mean? What do those three letters mean? I don't even know sometimes. But some of them, most of the time, they involve F-bombs, do they not? Yeah, they involve F-bombs. One of them is what? WTF. Who knows what that one means? I can't say it on camera. But that usually means the overwhelm, right? It's where we're controlling in that sense and we're like overwhelmed. WTF. Or then there's FML. Who knows that one? If you don't, Google it. FML, that's like the critique, the judgment, like, oh man, this is out of control. Man, my life is a mess right now. Man, what am I supposed to do? And you're holding on to that, right? Or then there's the other one, like, I don't give a F. Y'all know what that one is? Look it up if you don't. Where you're resigning. You're like, I'm just so overwhelmed. I'm trying to control. I can't keep it together. I'm just going to let it go. Forget this story. Forget it. But I'm going to invite you all to consider a different thing. And that's living AF. But what is that? Living in acceptance and in faith. Because ultimately that is the surrender, where we have to question, what do we believe about our lives? What do we believe about the universe? What do we believe about God? Because the truth is, we live in a universe that is good. We live in a universe that is abundant, that is prosperous. We live in a universe that wants to give us what we need. This idea of suffering is such a toxic idea. We don't have to suffer, people. We don't. But there is a process, and that is accepting where we're at, accepting what Spirit is telling us sometimes, accepting when they're saying, when we hear those whispers, those divine whispers, that this is the route you must take. This is where you must go for your greatest and highest good, and to be God expressing acceptance and then trusting. All right, this sounds really wild, that I'm gonna let this control go. I'm gonna surrender and just see what happens in this instance, but I'm gonna trust. I'm gonna believe that there is some truth here for me. I'm gonna step in with this bold face, this audacity, right? To be able to move forward. And that's where we're all at, all of us, to move forward in the triumph of the Spirit. And so it is.